Hello everyone, Dr. Mincey here. Hope you're doing pretty well. It's 2:30. I'm going to get the screen set up. We'll get going. And let's see how many people we've got here right now, because I can't see that little number. I do see it now. So those of you that are here, let's do it. So it's going to take us about an hour. Just a little bit of education on your screen. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little box that says chat. So if you have questions or anything, or if you want to say hi, you can put that there. And I may or may not see it during the speech, but I see that one person has said hello, and so I'll say hello back. And then we'll get started. I'm sure there'll be a few other stragglers that come on. We had quite a few registrations. Just got off another seminar just minutes ago with doctors from all over the world. That's why I have the shirt and tie on. I mean, I would love to do it in your honor as well. Let's get this going. All right. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about COVID-19. And this is recorded, so if anybody wants to share this with someone or would like a copy of it or wants me to send it to them, just let me know. I think it would be useful later on. But everyone I believe who's on here probably knows who I am, Dr. Tyran Mincey. I'm a holistic chiropractor from Montclair, New Jersey. I also own a nutrition company called Harmonic Energetics, and I take care of patients as a clinician, and I formulate nutritional supplements, herbs, vitamins. Our herbs are usually organic. We try to do it from a more natural, holistic, ecological perspective. And I've been doing that in Montclair for 23 years. I don't really know how to do things any differently, so I'm sort of stubborn and stuck in my ways, and my presentation will reflect that. Only because we do make a difference. At least that's what people tell us. So today our objectives are just to cover some known basics about this coronavirus, demystify it, make sure we can get people to understand exactly what it is, what it isn't. We don't know everything about it for sure. And we're going to cover what we know about the immune system, because that's really important to understand what's happening in your immune system. We're not going into super scientific detail. I'm not doing anything as far as heavy-duty words and things like that. So there will be general concepts which we'll look at. So we have a question here. Someone said hello, hello, and hello. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming. So some of the, I purposely left out a lot of heavy-duty scientific terminology because we don't need it. It's not relevant. You just need to know that something occurs. I don't think you need to know the gory details. But if ever you want it, I'm happy to provide it. And if you want any references, because some people do occasionally ask me for that, then I'll provide those too. I have all the references and everything. Some of the stuff I talk about is based on my experiences with patients and seeing patients, and doctors are allowed to have those. But some of the stuff is also based on what's in the scientific literature, has been researched, or what has been done historically over time. So we're going to cover some basics about corona, cover what we know about the immune system and its function, and talk about some solutions. And some of you are patients, so you know, because we're using these solutions. And literally, again, we just got off of a 1-hour webinar with doctors all over the world. And initially, the truth is, and hopefully you won't be mad at me for saying this, the webinar was scheduled for doctors, but Brianna, who's a new person in the office here, scheduled it, put it on the wrong promotional line on Facebook. And then we had patients who were starting to register. And I said, I should do it for patients too. So here we are. Everybody wins on this one. And hopefully you'll take some things away. So a couple of warnings here. The first warning is this is explicit. Oh, wait a minute. That's the wrong presentation. The main warning here is that we're going to cover some words, some terminology, so we could all be on the same page. But we're not doing a lot of heavy-duty stuff. So COVID 2019 is actually the disease which is caused by this new coronavirus. And it's in the corona family of viruses. There are 4, and they usually cause the common cold, and in some people, they cause viral pneumonia. But the thing is, the person has to be susceptible, so it's not the kind of thing where everybody automatically gets it. But the interesting thing about these viruses is over time they mutate and they change and they become more aggressive or less aggressive. And it's important to understand that that's what viruses do. It is related to the dreaded SARS, or Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, which is the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. And those were very aggressive, and lots of people suffered because of those. And so just the thought that it could be anything like that is terrifying for some people. So the first thing we need to do just to understand this virus is understand that it likes the surface of things. It likes to attach to the surface of organs and cells. And it does that in the lungs, particularly the air sacs, which are called the alveoli. And it also does that in the intestines, and it also does that in the heart and kidneys. So a patient who gets this particular problem could have symptoms in any of those places. And contrary to what's being put out there, people are saying that you just get a fever, or you just get this, or no, you just don't get anything. The person needs to be aware that any space that has this particular type of surface, this particular type of cell, could get this problem. And so those are the most common ones, but really these areas are found all over the body. And there's a little picture down the bottom there that kind of highlights how the virus goes and sticks its way into the cell, sort of forces its way in. All right, now if you're a healthcare provider or a guy like me, you would know what this is. If you're a patient who's well-read, you would know what this is. But otherwise, if you don't, you probably think it's a flag for a country. And this is actually not a flag for a country. This is an antibody. And the antibody is, this particular one, is an antibody that sits on the surface of things and protects things from getting in. And it's important because, I'm showing you because you need to know that the body makes these things as a defense so that things can't get in it. And we're not going to worry about the name too much of it, but we're going to say that when you get stressed, your body doesn't make the antibodies it's supposed to. And there's one chemical that I mentioned because everybody's sort of heard of it, a stress hormone called cortisol. And cortisol may suppress certain antibody levels. And the thing about this is that this could make a person's recovery take a long time. So you're hearing stories about people who get this virus and they don't die, but they take a long time to recover. I can tell you, managing patients, we're seeing one day 50% improvement in symptoms with a gradual return to normal within about a week, which is what it really should be. It shouldn't be this 3-week-long thing, but if a person is immune compromised or lacks the right nutrients, then they're likely to have this problem. So the first thing you have to know is if you're under a great deal of stress, you are at risk to a certain extent. And you have to manage the stress. And so what is stress? Because everybody talks about this mysterious thing called stress. And so stress is essentially something that can occur physically, chemically, emotionally. It's not just I can't pay the bills. It's overtraining. It's overeating. It's the environment. So all these things mount a stress on the body and cause these antibody levels to go. So it's very important that you understand the need to be able to manage stress and that it negatively impacts one of the most important defense systems, the antibody system. So now that we've kind of covered the part of the defense system of the body, which is the antibodies, and we make antibodies to things that we encounter. And that's how it works. Like the body comes across and gets a bacteria or a virus, and it says, okay, there's a bacteria or virus. I'm going to study this thing. I'm going to make antibodies. So next time this bacteria or virus comes around, I can defend it, and it won't ever even get in. It won't get close to me. That's one of the reasons we believe like you can't get the same cold twice. And the jury's out on whether or not you can get corona twice, but more than likely we think no, because the body studies it, kills it, and makes these antibodies, so next time it tries to come, it can't get in. So it will mutate in order to get in, and that's part of that sequence. Okay, so maybe I gave you a lot to think about there. But you know what the virus is, you know what it likes to do, and you know that you have antibodies. And that's just a fraction of your immune system. But where are we living? Let's talk about that, because it's relevant. Where are we living? A single meter of our planet's surface, just a meter, 1 meter, that's smaller than my adjusting table that people come on in here, right? 1 meter could be showered with hundreds of millions of viruses and tens of millions of bacteria in a single day. In just a single day. Just a meter. I just need you to sit with that for a minute. There's another slide here. Billions of viruses are falling to Earth right now. They're sitting right next to you. They're to your left, they're to your right. But that isn't why you have the flu. So people aren't getting sick because the viruses are present. They're not getting sick because the bacteria are present. They're getting sick because the defenses are down and because they're susceptible. The susceptibility conversation is a large one. There's a lot of reasons why people can be susceptible. We're not talking about that in detail. But the fact of the matter is, it's very important for us to realize that we are surrounded, engulfed, and swimming in a sea of viruses and bacteria every single day, whether you're in your house or outside of your house. So this concept and this notion that we could somehow live in a bubble, well, it just doesn't work. And this idea that you're going to be able to sanitize everything and clean everything so there are no bacteria doesn't work. This guy in the bubble doesn't have an immune system, so he's got to be there because the bacteria will eat him alive. Well, we have immune systems, and the basis for human function is the ecological relationship that's created by viruses, bacteria, and other things that are in the environment. Our immune system reacts to those, and it helps us become stronger and live longer. Let's talk more about viral exposures. There was a study done by the Human Genome Project back in 2001, where they set to map out the entire human genome, and they actually achieved all 21,000 genes. And they found all this extra DNA outside of the DNA that was on the human body. And they were kind of like wondering, like, what is that? And when they did research, they found that you had 10 to the 12, that's 12 zeros on the number 10, microbes on your skin. So right now, as we are all sitting here on our skin, if you touch it, even if you wash your hands, you have 10 to the 12 microbes on your skin. And if you dare take your finger and stick it in your mouth and somehow get to the back of your throat, you would see that you also have 10 to the 14 microbes in your gut. And all those microbes in your gut, we call some of them probiotics, are the basis for human immunity. And without them, you would be as helpless as a boy in the bubble. This is important, because the idea that somehow we are victims of the microbes is not completely true. There's an ecological relationship that's there with them. And they're present always, indoors and outdoors. So whether we like it or not, no matter how many showers we take, how much Listerine we use, how much alcohol we put on something, how many powerful chemicals we use, eventually we still end up like our friend Pigpen, because the bacteria then grow, multiply, and sometimes smell. So there's nothing wrong with being clean. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but the idea that you're going to be sterile, well, it's just not going to happen. And the idea that you're going to go somewhere where you're never going to run into bacteria is undesirable and not healthy. And the viral exposure studies that have come out, one in 2005, show that there were no significant differences between viral particles inside or outside. So whether you're inside or outside of a house, it wouldn't make a difference. And viral and bacterial particle concentrations were 2.6 to 1 times higher outside, but they still didn't consider that significant. And so when a person lets out a sneeze or a cough, they create this big spray of aerosol. We call it bioaerosol. And that bioaerosol is loaded with everything that was inside their mouth and their body. And I'm sure some of you are cringing right now as you look at this picture, but you sneeze, and so do I, and this is just bodily function. And that bioaerosol goes out and meets up with all the other stuff that we already talked about is in the atmosphere, and then we breathe that in. And we breathe it in, and it lands on the inside of our body, and our body mounts defenses against it thousands and thousands of times every single day, whether we like it or not. So why am I telling you all this? There is a reason why I'm telling you all this. A very good reason. Large particles. There are large particles that are floating about. When you and I have a conversation, sometimes a person might have a large particle come out of their mouth, travel across the room, and land on another person. People are wearing masks. Surgical masks block large particles. The large particle definition is anything that's larger than half a micron to 5 microns. That's really large. And viruses, however, they can be as small as 0.02 microns, all the way up to half a micron. So you see, a surgical mask doesn't quite do it. And the truth is, I actually measured the coronavirus, true story, and the coronavirus came out to 0.022 microns. So, the mask still cuts down, but it doesn't necessarily make you bulletproof to a larger degree. So you need to know that, because you need to do more than just wear a mask. Airborne bioaerosol type things, like what we saw in the sneeze, these can persist for hours. So it's important that you do some things to make sure that you're dealing with the particles that are in the air that could be a problem. If you are one of the people who is susceptible, you want to address this issue. Surface contact. If we look at the surface, your screen on your computer, the tabletop, the conveyor belt at the grocery store, your friend's shoulder, the leather jacket, any of these things. A person can touch your friend on the shoulder, give them a hug or a kiss, and you can come and do the same thing, and you pick up some of their ecology, we'll call it. And so in the case of corona, well, that surface contact, when you go and you touch your eye or your mouth or something, you now have sort of seeded the virus into the body. This is important to know. Let's go to the next slide. So all this is, I'm saying all this so that you understand that corona is really, truly a very contagious virus. There's no question about it. I can't argue with the numbers. I can't argue what I'm seeing as a healthcare provider. My wife is also a healthcare provider, and so we sometimes have discussions about what she sees. She sees more fatality than I see. I see more healing. But the fact is, it is here, and it is contagious. And it's aggressive. It was much more aggressive when it started in China, but contagious does not equal deadly. It's kind of like the common cold. A lot of people get the common cold. They pass it on, and nobody really cares. They stay home for a couple of days, the cold goes away, they come back. Corona is a really, really undesirable, bad, really bad cold, and nobody wants it. So my goal here in the practice has been to do two things. For the people that don't have it, we want to make sure we do everything we can to make sure they don't get it. And for the people who have it, we want to do everything we can to make sure that that time frame has shortened. And I think we've been able to do that really well. So the first thing I think I already mentioned is the idea that the symptoms that you may have may be related to slimy surfaces: congestion, sniffles, cough, sinusitis, diarrhea, stomach problems, indigestion. The first time you see or experience a symptom, or you notice somebody has it, that is the time to act. It's not the time to wait. And we'll talk more about that later. Here's some statistics for you. I went on, and it's 4 p.m. yesterday, decided I would take a look and get the hard numbers for you. There was 860,000 cases, I believe, at that time, and maybe there was 45,000 deaths, I believe it was. Anyway, the percentages came out like this. It was 94% of cases, a 5.5% death rate. It's terrible. People have died. The cycle of life, however, is birth, live a little, so life, and death. And this is how it goes. And a large portion of the population of people that are dying are over 65, or they have other illnesses, or what we call comorbidities. And that too is unfortunate. Another thing that I noticed while looking through the statistics, where there was a disproportionate number of African Americans and Latinos represented in the cases. And there could be a number of reasons which are way beyond our conversation here for that. But the bottom line is 5.5% is not that terrible when you really consider it in light of some other things we're going to talk about. So I'll come back to this 5.5% number in a little while. So to reiterate, contagious does not equal deadly. Do I want your cold? Do I want your herpes? No, I don't. But it's not deadly. And so that's really important to realize. And you don't want anybody else's cold or anybody else's herpes or anybody else's virus if you can avoid that, but it's not deadly. I mean, when you think about some of the other things that people are walking around with, we should be freaking out about those things, not this particular virus to the degree that we are. Here's some other numbers that come up. All deaths by certificate. Now, these are deaths that were given a death certificate. And the numbers are going to be much lower than anything that's reported, because the other ones are, they're reported, but they're not certified. So the numbers are kind of fudged a little bit, or maybe they're exaggerated a little bit to a certain degree. And so we're really not clear, but that's the best we have. They're kind of not ideal. But these particular numbers are based on certificate. And so on as of April 18th, cumulatively, it was 21,399 deaths, which is half of what the reported number was I gave you earlier. And then the actual deaths from COVID, so that was all deaths, 21,000, but the actual deaths were 2,400. And death from pneumonia, just to have a comparable at the same time, was 2,234, but I don't hear people running and going nuts over that. So these are just the facts. You draw whatever conclusions you want, but I'm looking at it with a question mark, just going, I'm sorry, I must have missed the memo. I mean, the part where I was supposed to freak out. Influenza deaths somehow went all the way down to 107, because many of those influenza deaths are being reported as something else, deaths from COVID. It's just not going to shift one year and all of a sudden influenza is gone and COVID's here. So you see, it makes it very very difficult for us to know who's telling the truth, what makes sense, and it creates a mass panic among people when they really shouldn't be over 5%. I didn't say you didn't want to boost your immunity and that there wasn't a problem. I didn't say if you have a comorbidity you shouldn't be concerned about perishing. You should. You just need to take the right action. But you also don't need to build a fortress around yourself and isolate yourself and cause psychological problems because of the overreaction. Some things you need to know about. If you see, hear, or are aware of a person around you that have these issues, or if you should have them, there are issues that relate to a possible infection with this coronavirus. And starting with sore throat, fever. Sometimes it's a fever that comes and goes, malaise, bowel dysfunction, and upper respiratory symptoms. And these seem to come on based on what I see, based on, in this particular order, in some people, in most of the cases. So while you're not a doctor, you're not going to treat. If your friend is telling you they got this really bad case of diarrhea and they don't usually have that problem, you might want to say, hey, you probably want to get that checked out, because that could be the beginning of something. Why are we going to wait until we have a problem? Because the more it advances, the more difficult it becomes to manage this problem. The other thing we'll see with corona infection is lower respiratory symptoms as the disease advances. And there's also people who get rashes that we've seen in the office, as well as, if it progresses, some severe respiratory distress. And that severe respiratory distress is what kills people. That's an emergency situation. They will need oxygen, hopefully not a ventilator. We're finding out through the grapevine that the ventilator probably wasn't a good idea in the first place, and the survival rate was lower. But when they have severe respiratory distress, the body is actually overreacting and kind of doing it to itself. So it just needs a little oxygen and some vitamin C, believe it or not. True story. There was an article in one of the newspapers where they were praising this doctor in New York because he was helping so many people that had corona. And what was he doing? He made this breakthrough. He was using vitamin C. And I thought, wow, that's so cool. Okay. The last thing that usually is there with this corona is a chronic cough. For some reason, it's kind of what it leaves with, and that's because of the damage it's done to the lungs, because this actually damages the lungs. That's what it does. It actually damages the lungs. This is a picture of a patient's rash. And you can imagine that we've had people come in that have had this all over their entire body. And we see this also in cases where things are dying. So when you're killing off viruses or cells that are completely infiltrated, because that's what happens, the virus goes, it enters the cell, it hijacks the cell, and then the cell starts trying to tell everyone else that it's having problems, and so the cell actually is killed by the body. And then all the stuff that's inside kind of goes out and it circulates around the body, and your liver's got to eliminate this. So we see this in people whose bodies are not eliminating the waste products fast enough, is one particular explanation. All right. That was a mouthful. Let's talk about prevention. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And there's different types of hygiene that we could employ to help us prevent this problem. The first one is the idea of physical hygiene, practices that allow you to be healthier and avoid sickness. And the first physical hygiene everyone's been pretty good at. It's like wash your hands, scrub the floor, wash the door handle. Those are all very good. But based on what I told you about where we live, within a few minutes, that area is going to be contaminated again. And that doesn't even include a person being involved. But then if a person's in the area, it's going to be contaminated even faster. So it is important to wash our hands a reasonable amount of times a day or whenever we're exposed. It's important to shower and keep our bodies clean. So we'll talk more about some of these things. So physical hygiene. Some of the things we do in the office, besides you going out and cleaning, but we do to try to help with the maintenance and upkeep of the body, is manipulation of organs, which some of you are familiar with. And yes, for those of you that are on here that don't know me, yes, we can manipulate organs without doing surgery or anything like that. It's relatively comfortable most of the time. Chiropractic adjustments, because they build immunity and are protective, and with each adjustment, the body can communicate with the brain better, and the outcomes are better in terms of how you feel. We've had people who have sinus infections. We treat them, they get off the table and say, oh my God, that's gone, that's better. Or if it's just energy, or if it's psychological well-being. All those things count toward decreasing stress, which increases antibody levels, which improves immunity, which is the goal we have. There are other wellness protocols we employ here for the purpose of immune stimulation. Some of them are too detailed to go into and too complicated, but let's just say that we have the keys to the immune system and to unlock it. And through stimulation of certain points on the body, we are able to do that more times than not. One of the things we always have to do when we're considering what's happening with the body, or our friends, or our loved ones, is look for changes in bowels, sleep, or energy patterns pretty early. And when patients are coming in on a wellness basis to get adjusted once a week, once every other week, we're looking for those changes. Are there any changes there? Because if we catch it early, we could take something that would last 3 weeks and turn it into probably 3 days. Yeah, I've seen it. It's pretty cool. With little or no symptoms, a sniffle. Important, especially if you're 65 and older. So some nutritional things, which many of you are already doing, some of you are not, and this gets customized, so some people are doing this, but this is something that applies to the majority of the population, is good old cod liver oil or good old vitamin D. And the reason why we insist that people do this is because it activates certain cells in your immune system that allow you to build antibodies. So you can imagine if today you got exposed and you had little or no vitamin D, then you would not be able to make an immune reaction. And that immune reaction should only take about 4 to 7 days. Well, you would be delayed. You'd probably be one of these 3-weekers. But if the vitamin D levels are where they're supposed to be and you got exposed and you got a cold, well, in 4 to 7 days, the body would have been studied and knocked this thing out because it was prepared. So this is why we insist on keeping the vitamin D levels where they need to be. African American and Islanders in particular have a need for vitamin D that's higher than Caucasian counterparts. And when you don't have it, you have more problems. And maybe it's no coincidence that those groups are disproportionately represented in cases dying and infected with COVID. It's interesting. Vitamin C and garlic. Vitamin C and garlic are a gift. Garlic is a gift. Garlic is everywhere. It's 1 to 2 cloves of garlic a day will do wonders for your health, boost your immunity, improve the ability to kill viruses, help cells detect when they have the viruses, lower your blood pressure, lower your cholesterol levels, and I could go on and on and on. In the office, we also use nutrition to help the immune system. We call it the immune circuit, but it's the immune system, and it's represented by the glands that you have in your throat, by a little pad that you have under here called your thymus, and by your spleen. And these are parts of the body that are responsible for your immunity. These that are on this slide and the protocols that are here are an urgent matter for patients who are over 60. You can't afford not to. And if you have any kind of immune compromise or comorbidity, you can't afford not to. Because once this virus gets there, it's very difficult to get rid of in someone who is already compromised. These govern susceptibility in people. They're yet another factor, though, that you can do something about. But what does sometimes happen, fortunately not too often for us, but it does, is occasionally you get a no response. Failure. It's never fun. So someone does take their vitamins and does do all the things they're supposed to do, and then they advance to actually getting the infection. Not time for a loss, just time to be more aggressive. So on first symptom for those with the comorbidities, and especially if they're over 65 and the elderly, it's inhalation therapy. We give you the clove and the eucalyptus, and we tell you put it on the palm of that hand, stir it clockwise, and inhale several times a day when you go to public places, when you come out of public places. You should be doing that for the rest of your life anyway, because you know you live in this atmosphere that's completely covered with viruses and bacteria. And then the consumption of herbs that compete with the virus, and here we are again. It goes back to garlic and bilberry and cinnamon. So in the first symptom, these are the things that we should be doing. We shouldn't be waiting, thinking maybe it will go away. And these aren't that difficult. We should have tea several times a day, made from herbs that we have remedies, made from knotweed and milk thistle. And we should have, NO is on this slide. That stands for nitric oxide. That's a powerful chemical made by the body used to kill viruses. And we have a sauna that increases those levels, and there are vitamins that increase those levels, and there are foods that increase those levels, which I'm happy to provide you with a list of after we get done. And for people who are super advanced and have a lot of difficulty breathing, there's hydrogen peroxide, which people actually breathe in, which helps the immune system because it uses that for defense. These are all things that are time-tested, have proven effective, and should be employed, not after, but before. Let's briefly talk about the two types of immunity. So there's two types of immunity. There's innate immunity, and that's inborn. That's what you get here with. You know, you come here a little kid, and you don't have any exposure, so you have no antibodies, and you have this immune system that just immediately responds and fights back. And what it does is it activates another immune system. And that's immunity that's acquired. You get that after a little bit of time from experience. And that's how you make antibodies. And so it should take 4 to 7 days. So if you know someone who's sick for longer than 7 days, they're not sick. I mean, they're sick, but they're also immune compromised. Their immune system is not working well enough to help them out. And one of the things we do when we're making nutrition recommendations in the practice is we're setting up the patients so we can take advantage of those two types of immunity. And during a visit, I don't necessarily have time to sit there and detail all this and tell you why I'm doing it, but I know for a fact that the scientific literature shows us that just having enough vitamin D will allow you to activate both of these immune systems. But if you don't, it won't happen, and your 4 to 7 day response is going to turn into 3 weeks or a visit to the hospital. Doesn't sound like it's a necessary thing to me. So let's talk more about prevention. This is a picture of one of these cells that gets activated by vitamin A and D. Looks kind of crazy. Might look like a politician I've seen every now and then. But either way, it is necessary for both immune systems to function, and it is activated by vitamin D. Without vitamin D, it just goes and sits and does little or nothing. Let's see what else we have. Cell alarms. What is a cell alarm? Well, it's sort of a made-up concept that I have here, but it explains a scientific phenomena where the virus gets into your body, this coronavirus, and it infects a cell because the antibody system has failed. And once it does that, the cell is now hijacked. It's like somebody taking your car. It's hijacked. And it starts taking over the cell's machinery and stealing resources from the cell. And the cell has an alarm. It's like a bank teller who can push the button when you're not looking. But the alarm won't go off if there's not enough garlic or there's not enough vitamin C. So this is why we put vitamin C and garlic there, so that if you should happen to get some sort of infection, the cell will then react and notify all the other cells of what's happening, and you'll get a quicker immune response, thus shortening the time again from your 3-week ordeal to 4 to 7 days. Let's talk about protection. What we do in the office to protect ourselves. You can adopt this the way you want to, and you can use this in your home, your workplace, because you're going back to work. If you didn't know that, many of you are going to go back to work, and you have to, if you're a person at risk, you have to kind of deal with the fact that just because everybody's going back to work doesn't mean that all those viruses in the atmosphere and the coronavirus is now going to just go away. And that's part of the problem with what we're doing here is there's always going to be what we call patient zero, a person who's carrying this around. And how do you know who it is? You can't tell. And so in the office here, masks are something that can be used, and I will go into some more detail in a couple of minutes about that. I got my own sentiments about it, but I'll tell you why and why I don't. Office air control. Nebulize. Many of you are familiar who've been here with the nebulizing diffuser that we use, and we put antiviral essential oils in there. Clove is one of the most inexpensive and powerful one of the most powerful antiviral oils. Tea tree is also a bit more expensive, and eucalyptus, which is a bit more expensive. All of these are amazing and work really well, and we suggest that you get those. We carry them all here all the time, so you're always welcome to come by and pick them up. We do sanitize our tables in between, and maybe for your desk at work, you might want to wipe it down periodically. And personal inhalations, most of you don't know this. When I walk out the room, I take my oil, I put it in the hand, I inhale, and then I go about my business. Just in the event that maybe, something came off of a patient during that visit, I just go ahead and inhale and take it and keep going. That way, if there was a viral particle that entered there, I did something to address it in addition to all the other stuff I've talked to you about. Our visits are spaced out, so if you're trying to refer someone in, you can know that we purposely space out the visits so there aren't more than 1 or 2 people in the office at a time. And we, for cases where we have had people that have been positive, you probably didn't know it because we quarantine them in the back, or we schedule them early in the morning or late at night when they're not around other people, and then we sanitize and clean up the room after that. So those are some things that we do. You can adopt these to your life. If it's your home and not that many people are coming, you can clean up periodically, but again, the universe continues to dump on us. Let's talk about masks, because this is really important, and I know I have about 10 or 15 minutes left here. What's the story with masks? The thing I don't like about masks, this is my opinion, is that they create a feeling of that things aren't safe. And that feeling sort of spreads very easily. When someone is upset or in a frenzy, it's contagious and it makes other people feel uncomfortable in a frenzy. So for me, that's one of the things. But that's my opinion, and that's all it is. There'd be a lot of other people that say, well, it's greater to use the it's a greater benefit to use the mask, and fine. But let's talk about what it's doing to your body. And you need to know this. So if we stand outside and we have nothing in front of us and we take a breath in, 78% of that air will be nitrogen. 21% of that air will be oxygen. 0.93 will be a gas called argon, and 0.04 will be carbon dioxide. There'll be a little bit of vapor in that air, depending on whether we're in August or December, and there will be some pollutants depending on if you're urban or rural. But when we breathe in, that's what we take in. But when we breathe out, that exhaled air now contains the same amount of nitrogen, 15% oxygen instead of 21. Argon has not changed, and the carbon dioxide level, which makes sense, has gone up from 0.04 to 4%, and it is saturated. That exhaled air is saturated with over 2 cups a day of water. That's how much you exhale. So, which is why we drink water, drink water. Why? Because every time you exhale, every day you're losing 2 cups. 2 cups through exhaled vapor. That's a lot. The proof of that is when you put your mask on and you take it off, it may be wet or damp inside. It also, that exhaled air has 250 pollutants that have come out of your body. So now think about it for a second. You're going to take that mask, put it over you like this, and inhale that exhaled air with the 250 pollutants and the saturated vapor for hours on end. And what's going to happen is you're going to end up with sinusitis, headaches, dizziness, and if you exercise in it, like I saw someone doing this morning, that's just downright crazy. You're stressing your body out, lowering your resistance, and increasing the odds that you're going to get an infection. You'd have been better off walking down the street without it. So, to my point, if you are a person at risk, yes, if you go into a grocery store or a place where there are lots of people, you might want to wear the mask. But if you're not a person that has comorbidities and is high risk, you might want to save it for the times when you really have to wear it. That's not my opinion. Those are the stats and the numbers as far as the air that you are breathing in and breathing out. I just work here. I'm just a messenger. So let's go to the next one. But remember, please don't, out of all the things that you shouldn't do, please don't exercise in a mask. You're going to stress your body out. Now, something else about the mask. You got to know this. This is very important. It only filters out 75% of what's in the air. So 75% is certainly better than no percent, so it takes down some of the likelihood that you'd be contaminated, compared to, and this is a typical surgical mask, compared to an N95 mask. The N95 masks are the masks that are used in viral wards where it's highly contagious, and it only filters out 95% of the viral particles. But if you took your surgical mask and you added onto it a nylon stocking, that would increase your effectiveness in your filtering by 90% because it keeps it tighter on the face. And so that makes it almost as good as an N95 mask. But there's one thing you have to know. Based on what the manufacturer says, the N95 mask filters as small as 0.3 microns. What size did I tell you I measured this coronavirus? 0.22. So, I'm not being hopeless. I'm not saying don't wear a mask. I'm just saying be aware that it might not solve all your problems. If you wear that mask when you go in the grocery store, you take out your eucalyptus oil and inhale it too at the same time in case something got in. That's what I'm saying. So what do we do? The protocol to deal with staying well is to make sure we consume lots of water, avoid sugar and sweetened juices. You know this, but I'm reminding you, if you're on this call, you probably are sneaking, doing some things you shouldn't do, so that's why I'm reminding you and why you jumped on here. Eat and consume plants to protect the slippery surfaces. And I can give you a list of those. I don't think I included in here, but there are some things like watercress, celery, broccoli, beets, spinach. All of these assist immunity in a really big way. And the vitamins that we have each of you on, or that people are wondering what to take, A, C, D, calcium are minimum. Adjustments stimulate immunity, so we want to make sure that we are doing that, and we want to make sure doing it regularly. It's not like I'm going to go once every 2 months. Until this thing is over, I do suggest patients once every 1 or 2 weeks, and there are some patients who might need more or might need less. We take it on an individual basis. Avoid sugar and overeating. While it tastes good, give your body a break. The immune system needs that space, and it needs that time. Let's put some things in perspective here. The leading causes of death in the United States are heart disease, over 500,000. Cancer, close to over 500,000. Accidents, 160, 170,000. Respiratory diseases. Look at this. Stroke, Alzheimer's, diabetes. Every single one of these exceeds the number of deaths from corona. Yes, we have some things to worry about, but these are like the elephant in the room kind of thing. And sugar should be listed on there, but that elephant's not even listed. So I want you to be considering these things before you freak out about this, but I do want you to be safe and take appropriate measures so you don't have to be sick, but the likelihood you're going to die you're more likely to die of natural causes, statistically, factual. But here's how we should operate. At the first symptom, you come in the office, and what we do with patients at the first symptom, or when patients come in and believe they're sick, we check the intestines, because every single case I've seen of corona has something going on with the intestines. Check the lymphatic system. That's usually congested. And we administer a 24-hour protocol which is customized for each patient. Sometimes it involves teas, sometimes it involves fasting. I have to know the person to be able to tell you exactly what they're supposed to do. We do have a herbal preparation we use called AminoMax, which is helpful. That has to be taken hourly. And we suggest very strong baths in hot water with oils, as well as infrared saunas, because we want to give a fever and keep a fever. And that brings me to something that is not in the presentation. Fever is good. Fever is not bad. You want a fever. But if your fever is going too high, it's doing so because you're dehydrated. So you need more water. You drown a fever. Very important. All right, finally, omega-3 fatty acids boost immunity and make cells tough. And so we suggest everybody does that. More water and more AminoMax hourly. This is the protocol we typically use with patients that are in the office. 7 minutes left. I'm going to tie this whole thing together here and take a couple of questions because I'm pretty sure we'll have some. Coronavirus is a contagious virus, but it is not deadly for the majority of people. If you've lost a loved one or you know someone, my condolences, and I'm sorry. But the statistics show us that we're right now in the middle of a pandemic that has a 5% death rate. Viruses and bacteria are the basis for human immunity and part of the ecological relationship that we all have with the planet and with ourselves. And we can support basic immunity as a workable defense mechanism and use things from the plant world like essential oils to help us defend ourselves also. We can also use diet and lifestyle. Supplements, adjustments, stimulation of the immune points, these all boost immunity. And they should be used not last, but first. So don't wait until you can't breathe to come in. Come in the minute it starts, and we'll beat it. Basic supplementation will boost the frontline immunity, as I showed you, based on how your body works in antibodies. And essential oils are respiratory defense. On first symptoms, the use of the protocol has shortened symptoms and hastened recovery. And that's all we want to do. I'm going to take some questions. And I do want to, you can type them in the chat. I do want to point out something that I think is really important. And it's this quote by Stephen Cosgrove. It's, never judge someone by the way he looks or a book by the way it's covered. For inside those tattered pages, there's a lot to be discovered. And I bring that up because one of the things that makes people unstable is when other people pass away. And when it happens suddenly, the number one statement that I hear is, he was perfectly healthy. And I'm telling you, based on my experience, he wasn't. You just judged the book by the cover. You didn't know what was happening with the tattered pages inside. And so it's very important to realize that. And even when someone's under the care of a doctor, if I told you the number of times people tell me nothing was wrong, nothing's wrong, and they get here and there's a lot wrong, it's important to realize that. So don't be destabilized by the death of another person. You know, you should be destabilized, but don't think that they were perfectly healthy. I assure you, they weren't. Thank you so much for taking some time and spending an hour with me to come out of our isolation and our distancing. I can open the floor up for questions if anybody has any. I think I see one here, but I can hardly read it, so I need to just put some glasses on here for a second. And great question. Does it make a difference if you sneeze in your elbow? I'm going to say it's considerate. It's a considerate thing to do because that aerosol that's going to be there is going to be mostly in the elbow. So I do sneeze in the elbow, and I do recommend it, especially in this day and age where people are freaking out. Why does the WHO and CDC recommend the use of masks if they are indeed ineffective to protect from airborne virus relative to the size of microns? Well, Nate, I can just go like that and tell you that, you know, the measurements are the measurements, and they're not completely ineffective. They cut down, and it just might be a question of, hey, this is the best we have to protect the public. Politically, I think there's some other things going on that don't quite make this whole thing add up for us, and it doesn't make sense that they're doing all this. So there's something coming down the pike, and I don't know how many of you are fighters, but I got a feeling we're going to have a fight on our hands, because there are people that have other intentions that some of us may not agree with. And the proof is that this doesn't make any sense, and the numbers hold up to that fact. We got another question here. Because we have been sheltering in place, does it definitely increase the need for vitamin D? I don't think it increases the need for vitamin D because you've been sheltering. If you're doing what we typically use 5 a day, that'll bring the blood level up to 50. The alarm is when we have patients come in and their vitamin D levels are like 10 or 5, and you know, it's just like they are in trouble. That is just not where you need to be. But yeah, if you're sheltering, that 5 a day should be good for most people. That'll bring the blood levels up to 50, and then you should be doing pretty good with that. Any other questions? Well, I don't see any other questions here, and it's like that hour goes by fast, but I'm going to go home and pass out because this is I've been talking for 2 hours straight, which, you know, I do more typically. But I am so grateful that you guys all took the time. Hold on, there's another question. I was just getting ready to get off. Oh, okay, great. Is it possible to have the coronavirus and another virus at the same time? Yes, I'm not sure if you were on for the initial presentation when I talked about the atmosphere, but basically if you look to your left and you look to your right, you are surrounded by viruses. And when you go outside and you breathe the air, you are loaded by tons and tons of viruses. We all need to cancel and forget the idea that there is this mysterious virus that's going to kill everybody. They are everywhere. They are always there. They are part of the ecology that we live in, and they are part of that system of recycling the planet. So you are fighting right now while you're talking to me and watching this video. There's a war going on in your body, and you're fighting hundreds and hundreds of viruses. It just so happens that the corona was one of them that was a little more aggressive and was able to breach where the others weren't. And this is why it's so important to manage stress properly and take excellent care of yourself, because that immunity, which is building every day, every time you go outside, every time you walk down the street, is always happening. It's a gift, the fact that we can do that, honestly. So it's something we should embrace. You know, it would be corny, but I think we should have a Love Your Virus Day, where we go out and we just embrace all the viruses around us and just acknowledge their importance. But the medical establishment has us set up to believe in this whole germ theory thing, where that if there's one virus or one bacteria, it's going to kill everybody and you must drug it out and do all these things to it. And if that were true, we'd all be dead right now. Every single one of us. Any other questions? Well, you guys were totally and completely awesome. I have to say, as a speaker who does lots of public speaking events, this is very bizarre because I can't read or see my audience, so I'm not always sure what the reactions are. But it still is pretty cool that you came on. Why does WHO advocate against prevention? That's a great question, and thank you so much. I appreciate you too. WHO, yes, of course, and WHO advocates against prevention. I don't really understand that. They're telling people different things, and well, I do understand it. It's because the people who are in charge of it are typically medical doctors, and their training pushes them in that direction. Same thing with this whole mass push for vaccination, which you're going to get pretty soon. Excellent, excellent. Let's see, is there another question? That doesn't put dollars in their pocket. Thank you so much. Someone said that doesn't put dollars in their pocket, and you're absolutely correct. Prevention does not put dollars in the pocket. There is a medical, I guess we could call it a economy that is created by medicine and that is created by sickness, and no one really wants to get a cure. They want you to be able to go out and get sick and come see them, and if they cure you, then you never have to come back. And who can make money that way? So that's what it's all about. I think at the end of the day, this is all about the dollar. I hope you guys will step up if you need to, and whether it's voting or taking political moves that support what you believe is right, not what I believe is right. And in the meantime, I appreciate every single one of you taking the time out to hear me with my crazy opinions, and I wish you all health. And this is being recorded. If you'd like a copy, you could let me know. You guys have a great day. I'm going to go eat a banana. Bye.